The Ohio State Buckeyes are one win away from their first national championship since 2014. Would that aforementioned national championship win over Notre Dame erase the Michigan failure, another Michigan failure from earlier on this season? That might be a specific example, but there's a more broad talking point as it pertains to the rest of the Big Ten as we go around this big nation.
From Pasadena to Piscataway, College Park to the Coliseum, Seattle to State College, Columbus to Camp Randall, the Zoo to the Rock, and everywhere in between. This is where Big Ten fans gather to talk America's premier national conference with your host, Big Ten Ted. All Big Ten, all year long. This is Big Nation.
1 week from now, 7 days away, in Atlanta, Georgia, the national championship game between the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. We are on the brink. We are on the verge of back-to-back Big Ten national champions. Of course, Michigan last year, and possibly Ohio State if they can get it done over the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Man, this whole 12-team college football playoff has been very, I think, revealing in a lot of different ways, and that's where I really want to start with this specific commentary, is the 12-team college football playoff, because Ohio State, and Notre Dame, I guess to a certain extent, Ohio State is a perfect example of the benefits that the college football playoff can provide a team that is imperfect throughout a college football season. The perfect jawline is no longer required to win a national championship in college football. It's okay if you start the season with a dad bod. It's okay if through the middle of the season you got that dad bod going on, but as long as you keep on working at it, as long as you keep on doing your crunches, as long as you stay on the treadmill, as long as you are in shape and at peak physical condition, by the time the college football playoff begins, that's what matters. And Ohio State has certainly proven that this season with this college football playoff run. It's okay if you lose a couple of times. It's okay if you take some lumps in the road. And as somebody that is imperfect, I can certainly appreciate that. I can appreciate where you don't have to be undefeated. You don't have to have that one loss versus a ranked opponent by 3 points or 6 points or 9 points. I appreciate that teams can learn. I appreciate that teams can figure it out. I appreciate that teams can have a fire lit under them by losing to their arch rival for the fourth consecutive season. I appreciate that that's kind of the world that we live in right now in college football. There is some cost to that. There is some effect of that we are certainly going to talk about as well. But I wanted to make sure that I talked about that right away, because expecting 18 to 22-year-olds to play at that type of level for an entire season, a little bit unsustainable. So I think the way we have it now, and I know the playoff format I'm sure is going to get tweaked by the time we get to 2026, but kind of the current world we live in right now gives so many teams an opportunity to be able to bounce back. I think throughout the entire season, Ohio State was one of those teams, talent-wise, roster-wise. We know that they were one of the best, maybe the best team and most talented team in all of college football. They just certainly needed to figure some things out, and they've certainly done that now that we've gotten through the run in the 12-team college football playoff. No doubt about it. College football has been built on rivalries. Beating your rival for so many teams out there has been a barometer for success. They say, throw the records out the window in a rivalry game. They say, it doesn't matter what you do the rest of the season. As long as you beat your rival, you have had a successful season. These have been talking points throughout previous eras of college football. But this era now that we began this year of college football maybe creates some complications to it. And it really is the crux and the talking point of the headline that is this commentary. That if Ohio State is able to beat Notre Dame in 7 days and they're able to win that national championship, does that erase the fact that they lost to a 6-5 Michigan team, that they lost to Michigan for a 4th straight year? In no rivalry is it more prevalent of beating your rivals the barometer of success, throwing the records out the window, all of that rivalry speak, so to speak. It's no more prevalent than in this Michigan-Ohio State rivalry. In a previous era, as recently as last season, this Michigan-Ohio State game was the gatekeeper to that next level of college football, which was the Big Ten championship, which was the college football playoff, which was a potential national championship. In a previous era, Ohio State, much like last season, would be sitting around and they'd be preparing for some bowl game. You'd probably have a good amount of opt-outs, whether you win or whether you lose. Did it really matter? Did it pale in comparison to the result of that Ohio State-Michigan game? We've certainly seen that the past few seasons. But this year, obviously, was very different. And I think this year is maybe the pivot point for not just Ohio State and Michigan. Of course, that is the rivalry. That is the main one. I think it's the best rivalry in all of college football. It's the rivalry that really encapsulates what I'm talking about here, but there's much more, and I think it's more of a broad point throughout the Big Ten and throughout college football as it pertains to how certain teams are going to view rivalries in the current day and age of college football. If we have the biggest and the baddest rivalry there is, and Ohio State loses to a 6-5 Michigan team, but they're able to bounce back and win a national championship, what does that say? And what does that do for the current state of college football rivalries? To answer that question, it depends on who you are. And it depends what your definition of success is. I talked about at the beginning of this commentary. In previous eras, beating your rival was everything. Ohio State beating Michigan, Michigan beating Ohio State will not change. That will still remain a lot. It will still remain pretty darn close to everything. But it is not the be-all and end-all of getting to the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is now a lot like the format, and the path to an ultimate goal is a lot like the National Football League. I'm going to use the Green Bay Packers for an example. Yes, I know they fell short in the NFL playoffs yesterday to the Philadelphia Eagles. Yes, I know that their season is over. But this year's Green Bay Packers, they got swept by the Minnesota Vikings, and they got swept by the Detroit Lions for like the first time in 20 some odd years. But if Green Bay was able to go on a run and somehow, some way, in a hypothetical world, win a national championship, win a Super Bowl, do they look back and say, well, I don't know, this season's a little bit complicated. Hey, we lost to the Vikings. We lost to the Lions. No, because the ultimate goal in the NFL is not beating your rivals. It's winning the Super Bowl. I'm not saying we're there yet. College football rivalries mean way more than NFL rivalries. But I think there's a lot more flexibility. I certainly think there's a lot more diversity in college football. And I think there's certainly a lot more barometers of success in college football than there are, of course, in the National Football League. But if you're a program in the Big Ten, like Michigan, if you're a program like Ohio State, if you're a program like Penn State, if you're a program like Oregon, if you're one of those top programs in the Big Ten, now your goal is a national championship. That is your goal. Whatever you have to do to be playing your best at the end of the season to get to that national championship. That's what matters. If it takes a loss to Michigan to light that fire under your butt and to get you playing a better brand of football in the playoffs, then that's what needs to be done to be able to achieve that. I posed this question on Twitter at the beginning of the year, and I framed it in the Wisconsin Badgers and Minnesota Golden Gophers lens. If you are a Wisconsin fan, would you lose to Minnesota 5 straight years, 6 straight years, if it meant that you could go on a college football playoff and national championship run? The answer to that question probably should be yes. And you could do it vice versa. If you were a Minnesota Golden Gophers football fan, would you lose to Wisconsin 6 consecutive years if one of those years, maybe 2 of those years, you knew that you could put together a team or teams that could go on a national championship run? Each team's definition of success and how they approach this thing is going to be different. I started with this Ohio State-Michigan rivalry. These are 2 programs. I know Michigan was certainly down this year, but Michigan is going to be back in this playoff conversation, maybe as soon as 2025. But then you look at a program like the Oregon Ducks. Historically, their rivalries have been against Oregon State, which is a G5 program. They should not lose to them, ever, okay? And then you have a Washington team that went 6-7 this past year. If Oregon, like they did, Oregon's goals are like, duh, we want to beat our rivals. Now, I think Washington is certainly going to continue to climb the ladder, but that's an example where national championships and making that 0 into a 1 are a much bigger deal than beating your rivals. So each team has a different perspective. Each team has a little bit of a different lens, not only in the Big Ten, but in all of college football. That's what this new era has done, and I think it's given more teams more of an opportunity. These 2 teams, Notre Dame and Ohio State, were ranked outside of the top 4 in the final college football playoff rankings. They would not have been eligible for a national championship in a previous era of college football. And that circles back to my point at the beginning. It's okay to lose once. It's okay to lose twice. Dare I say, it might even be okay to lose to your rival if it means winning a national championship. And I'm going to circle back and give you one final answer right now. Does Ohio State winning the national championship erase what happened to Michigan in late November? To my viewing, it does not make it a clean slate. Okay, if you have the big block M, all of a sudden, does winning a national championship equal a blank sheet of loose leaf paper? No. But you can see the eraser marks go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And you see maybe remnants of the M, but you don't see the whole thing. In the future, there are going to be players like the Jack Sawyers of the world and the JT Tuimoloau's of the world. They are going to play in the National Football League, and they might be playing on the same team as some former Michigan Wolverines. And some of those Michigan Wolverines might be sitting there and saying, hey, remember when we beat you 4 straight years? Remember when you never beat us? You never got that pair of gold pants, and that is going to sting. No doubt about it. And seeing the reaction on the field after that Michigan-Ohio State game from the Buckeye players, you know that stung those players that will never get another opportunity to play in this rivalry, this great rivalry, and have a chance to beat Michigan ever again. It stings, no doubt about it. But you know what else that people are going to be talking about, maybe in NFL locker rooms or when these players are retired and they're going to be able to look back on? They're going to say, yeah, that stung. But you know what was great? When we were able to rebound from that and go on a playoff run and win a national championship, if they do indeed get it done against Notre Dame. Winning a national championship for the Ohio State Buckeyes, it would not completely erase the bad feeling that they had and the bad feeling that they will continue to have of this class never beating Michigan. But bringing a national championship home to Columbus, Ohio will mean a whole hell of a lot. College football lives in a little bit of a complicated era. Ohio State may be Exhibit A of that complications. I want to hear your thoughts on this matter because it's a gray area. It's not black. It's not white. I'm sure a lot of different people have a lot of different opinions. Leave said opinions in the comments below, why don't you? I'm Big Ten Ted. We'll see you in the next one.
Thank you for watching and listening to Big Nation. Make sure to subscribe and follow Big Ten Ted on X, YouTube, and podcast platforms to stay in the know on all things Big Ten football.